Life's good.
Hey, it's Diane, Key, and LG bringing you a new episode of Now What? Today we're here to discuss a critical moment in American history. All of us witnessed the horrible events unfold in Washington, D.C. last week as an angry mob of Trump supporters attacked the United States Capitol as Congress was certifying the Electoral College vote for President Joe Biden. In today's episode, we are going to explore a timeline of events that led up to taking over the Capitol, discuss the questions how and why it happened, who's responsible, examine the police response to this overtake and how it differs from the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, and speak on what happens next. Today, we have a special guest. So before we dive in, Key, why don't you introduce our special guest for today's topic?
Absolutely, Diane. And of course, I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce this next guest here. And I'm so glad that he agreed to be on today. He's a great person, just a great man, a great brother, a great teacher. He's a leader in our communities. He's well educated, very well spoken. He's also someone who's very well educated. He's a Morehouse man. He has his master's degree. He's also a business owner and entrepreneur. I want everybody to welcome our next guest to the Now What podcast, Mr. Jeremy Writt. Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that very gracious introduction. You're way too kind. I'm just a regular dude, just like everybody else out here trying to make it. But I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to be asked to be on the show. I'm a fan of the show, so it's been cool to be able to participate more actively with you guys.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
So let's talk about what's really going on in America. What happened a week ago, a little bit over a week ago, still has so many open questions. It obviously has impacted everyone on this show and everyone listening in our entire country. Key, as our show's resident historian, give us a timeline of events that went down before, during, and after of the Capitol riots.
Absolutely. So, like you said, January 6th was a dark day for American democracy. What I will tell you is that the events that led up to that started way before the date of January 6th here. What I will tell you is that before the election, President Trump had used his platform of Twitter, which he has, more than 80 million followers, to bash the American institutions, erode the confidence of the American voters. Claims of voter fraud for President Trump began way back in 2016. After winning the Electoral College vote, Trump also falsely claimed that he won the popular vote if you didn't count the illegal votes.
Donald Trump is falsely claiming he only lost the popular vote because millions voted illegally for Hillary Clinton. Despite winning the election, Trump is reviving unfounded allegations of voter fraud, a sign he's unwilling to drop his penchant for conspiracy theories now that he's the president-elect.
They did a study because his Twitter account has been deactivated. The top 3 two-word phrases used by President Trump in his 4-year term. You could probably guess what number 1 was. Number 1 was fake news. Number 2 is United States. And number 3 is witch hunt. So out of the top 3 two-word phrases, one of them being fake news and the other one witch hunt, President Trump has again used his platform to sow doubt and discord on the American psyche since he has stepped onto the political scene. Now let's flash forward to the 2020 election on November 3rd, where Americans of all creeds, all colors went to the ballot box amidst a pandemic and cast their ballot for president of America. It took 5 days, about 5 days, 4 or 5 days. November the 7th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris was declared winner of the 2020 presidential election. That same night, President Trump tweeted, "I won this election by a lot." In my mind, this is a moment where the match was actually put to the kerosene. If we had a rational president, this is the moment where he could have conceded, and this is the moment where he could have addressed his supporters. I've been a part of elections that have lost, campaigns that have been unsuccessful after pouring out 16, 17-hour days, working tirelessly for weeks and weeks on end, and to come up short. It's a tough pain. It's a pain like no other, almost. So I understand what his supporters were going through. And instead of consoling his supporters, what he did is he actually put out fraud or claims of voter fraud. What we've seen since then is a string of court cases that President Trump lost. There were more than 40.
Tonight, a judge President Trump appointed himself, handing him a searing defeat in Pennsylvania, even as the president insists the race is not over.
You're going to see things happening over the next week or two that are going to be shocking to people.
But after weeks of trying to overturn the results of the election, his legal team has come up with nothing. No credible evidence whatsoever of widespread voter fraud.
At this point, the election is done. The election is over. December 19th is when Trump tweeted about the rally. He's like, "Hey," and I quote, "big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild." January 5th, we have the runoff elections in Georgia, and what happens is stunning. We have an upset losses in Georgia where the Republican Party actually lose 2 Senate seats, which also means that they lost control over the Senate. At 6 a.m., Trump supporters began to gather outside in D.C. At 8:17, President Trump used his platform, his favorite, Twitter, to again address allegations of voter fraud. At 11 a.m., the rally begins. The name of this Trump rally is called the Save America rally. There are people that are there that have been getting hyped up for months after the election, hyped up, and now they're attending a rally called Save America because their president has told them that America is in danger.
Let's have trial by combat. I'm willing to stake my reputation. The president is willing to stake his reputation on the fact that we're going to find criminality there.
And now what we can tell you is that at 3:03, rioters are photographed on the Senate floor. And at this point, the United States Capitol has been overrun by a mob of white, angry Trump supporters. Our country right now is left with many questions to be answered here. And Diane, this is where I want to bring you in. All of us sat and watched. I know myself, I was just flabbergasted at what I was seeing on TV and what I was seeing on social media. Diane, what were your thoughts and feelings as you watched the Capitol be overran?
I was just at a loss for words whenever the riots began. I don't want to say that I was that I was indifferent, because I definitely understood the significance of the event that was occurring. It was clear to me that it was another demonstration of white privilege. And like I said before, this is what happens when white people do not get their way. For me, I felt like, I should never have to explain to anybody ever again that racism still exists. But for me, it was more of the visual that was on TV for the entire world to see. And it was, it was appalling.
Yeah. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on, as you were watching the Capitol be overrun by white supremacists?
So first, I want to say I love you, Diane, and I may be at risk of her putting a battery in my back, but I was wholly unbothered because this was garden variety whiteness to me, and I coined the term at the time. You guys have been saying rioting. I called it wyoting, which is WHIOTING, because to me it is white peopling. And I say that to say, not to say that all white people do this, but my immediate reaction, I think I even posted this. I said, the events at the Capitol right now are a crystal clear example of white privilege. And then I went on to talk about how wrong much of white America was in their response to how Colin Kaepernick chose to protest versus how these folks chose to protest. Not one window was broken by him taking a knee. Not one building was destroyed. Not one police officer was harmed. But he was persona non grata for 4 years and counting, because he had the audacity to say that black and brown people should not be meeting the end of that billy club at a higher rate than their other members of society. He had the audacity to speak truth to power, and he was ostracized, and everyone like him who has been ostracized in the NFL because of standing up. And so when I saw that was vindication for him and for the people who believe in his movement. I was saying that we are doing it the quote unquote right way, and you still don't want to hear us. We got these folks breaking multiple laws and causing damage to the Capitol. But they're only causing damage to the Capitol, and when I say Capitol, I mean PITOL, because my other point was this would have been handled a lot differently had they been actually attacking the Capitol, CAPITAL, because America is a corporation. They attacked the People's House. That's our taxpayer dollars that are going to be used to replace those windows in those buildings and those desks and things that they desecrated inside. But if you attack a Target, everybody and their mom has a problem with it. Everybody wants to get all upset about that because this is not how Americans do things. And da-da-da. I was like, you know what? Holler at me when y'all get real about Tulsa. Holler at me when you get real about the indigenous people who have been relegated to reservations and third-class citizenry in the nation that they were in before we ever got here. Let's address those original sins before you want me to cry about what happened on the Capitol. I don't care. It was just another Wednesday to me, because I don't see the Capitol any longer as the seat of democracy or the seat of power in America. That has for a long time resided in the hands of the oligarchs who own those senators and congressmen based on them needing money in order to get reelected. And so America was just Americaning right there in that moment. To me, I didn't feel ashamed on a national or international level, because I think that we've been huge hypocrites for a long time. And it was comforting in that they can't hide behind their marketing team anymore, because that's the manifestation of the 75 million people who still voted for Trump after the 4 years of what he's been doing. So it tells me what we've been saying, that Trump is just a symptom of what ails America. And it's not going away just because his administration is ending. They're still here. They're still waving those flags. And I, for one, would much rather know who my enemy is than have them hiding next door or snickering or stammering underneath their breath as I pass through their checkout line. If we go back to that other story, they've been here. They've been racist, whether it's Baltimore or Bald Knob, Arkansas. There are racists everywhere, and I like knowing who they are.
Yeah, definitely. Racism was exposed. If there's one thing that we can give Trump a lot of credit for, is for exposing that underbelly of racism and putting it on TV for all of us to see. And like you said, Diane, anyone that even attempts to open their mouths to say that racism doesn't exist or that privilege doesn't exist, watch the tapes of January the 6th. Me personally, I was angry as someone who served in the military, as someone who wants to believe in these institutions, because at the end of the day, at the point we don't believe in these institutions anymore, then what do we have left, really? I was upset, especially understanding how we protest, how we try to be peaceful. You mentioned Colin Kaepernick. I think about the protest, the Million Man March that happened in 2020, and how it was a very peaceful situation. However, there were armed guards on the Capitol steps to meet Black Lives Matter during that protest. They were well prepared. The Capitol Police, the military, they were out in full force, and their presence was very well known. I was angry, not only because I watched our Capitol become overrun. I heard reports of feces being strung through the building. I seen a Confederate flag in the halls of the United States Capitol. And that is something that has never happened in American history until January the 6th, 2021. I was pissed.
What difference does it make if the flag is in there if we're electing officials who believe in the same things that the KKK believe in?
You're right. You know what? You're right. But symbology says a lot, man.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
and especially when it's like flags and when it's government. I mean, we plant that flag when we take shit over. You know what I'm saying? Like when countries come in and take over or overthrow or whatever it is that you want to call it, one of the symbols that you do to demonstrate that takeover happened is you plant that flag. And for me to see the Confederate flag in the United States Capitol for the very first time, to me, that means to me a big symbol that white supremacy, not only is it alive and well today in 2021, it is still trying to overthrow our government. It's still trying to overthrow our systems. And now it's risen to the point where they actually have enough power to raise that flag in the Capitol. And I'm like, what in the hell? So I'm pissed because I'm like, where's the military? Where's the police? This is Washington, D.C. This is the head of the military power in the world. You're in D.C. How in the world do you allow traitors to storm that Capitol and raise that flag in that building on that day? I guess that's what I was more pissed about.
Because nothing that they did adversely affects the stock market. Nothing that they did adversely affects the international markets for the companies that make up the corporation of America to continue to conduct business.
Yep.
Let them do that, and you'll see a much different response.
Absolutely.
Is what I'm saying. And all of that was theater to me. It was all theater. It's all more things for us to fight amongst each other instead of actually going at the folks that are holding us down and that are taking away our freedoms and our ability to actually make those things that America is supposed to stand for actually mean something for Americans.
I agree with you 1,000% there. And that leads me to kind of my next question is, who do you feel is most responsible for this attack on the Capitol?
America is damn responsible for the attack. The damn Republican Party, Trump, anyone who is silent or indifferent to white privilege, racism, Trumpism, fascism is responsible for this.
Every time a liberal remains silent in the face of whatever manifestation of racism and classism, because it doesn't affect them as closely, you're to blame. Every Republican that went along with Trump and his propagating this conspiracy theory or conspiracy theories, if you have a racist uncle or grandparent and you don't check them when they say wild and foul stuff in front of you, you are to blame just as much as they are, because when you allow that mindset to fester and grow, because I don't think it ever went anywhere, for the record. But anytime that you are not checking that and you're allowing it to live in your circle and you're not ostracizing those people, you've allowed this to happen. One of the things that are different is the difference between what America does and what Germany did is they recognized and copped to their sin and to their wrongdoing. And then they took overt steps to make sure that it could not happen again. You can't fly a swastika in Germany. It's not just seen as, well, there are different arguments to every side of the story, and we have freedom of thought and expression, blah blah blah. Like, no, those were people who tried to destroy this union, who are still trying to have their own white country or non-brown, non-people of color country, white nationalists. And so they're still trying to attack the union, and we allow it because, that's what polite society says. If you're white, because if you attack any of America's imperfections or highlight any of America's imperfections, then you're told to go back to where you came from, or you don't belong here, or you're not a real American, any of those things. And so, yeah, all those folks are responsible.
You're right. How many times have you heard, people say, go back to where you came from, or if you don't like it, you can leave. But they feel that this is their country. So we don't like this decision. We're not going to leave. We're going to fight, literally. Right. White supremacy, in my mind, is most responsible for this attack. And white supremacy has been something that has dominated this nation since its inception. Since before the 1700s, since 1600s, white supremacy has dominated the thought here in America. It's still dominating the thoughts, policies, laws, economic plans, everything. It still dominates the land today. With that being said, we are making inroads. However, from my perspective and my vantage point, like you guys said, what I saw was an exercise in pure white privilege. And again, that is the root cause of the attack on the Capitol. And until America deals with this, like you said, Jeremy, Germany took overt steps to deal with this. America, I think we forgave the generals, right? We did a lot to try to help reintegrate the Confederate States after the Civil War. Some of those things at the peril of Black people.
From moment one, yesterday's ugliness had an added layer of bile to it. White extremists rampaging and an anemic police response. At times, apparently a friendly one, posing for selfies with rioters, assisting some down the stairs, arresting very few. That says one thing to many watching on.
What do you guys, I want to hear from you guys, though, thoughts on how the police response would be different if this was Black Lives Matter or any other minority group that was protesting.
My thoughts were back to the fact that whiteness is a social construct that's created in order to keep a caste system in American society. Regardless of when you came here as an immigrant, if your skin was pale, it was easier for you to assimilate into American mainstream society than it was if your skin was not pale. And so this different response to pale-faced riders versus darker-skinned riders is just the latest example of how the captains of industry and commerce in America, which I call which I call oligarchs, keep us separated. Because now, instead of being mad at them, we're mad at how the police treat them versus the police treat us. We're not focused on the fact that police shouldn't be treating anybody like this. We're focusing on how differently we have to deal with that. We're not focusing on the fact that our resources, whether they're human or geographic or ecological, are being stolen or misused for the benefit of a very small minority. And as long as we focus on that, nothing's going to change.
Absolutely. I think this adds to the noise, right?
Yeah,
Gets
absolutely.
us further away from true solutions and even discussing the true issue. Because here we are, and we're speaking about what should happen to these people, what's going on there, instead of addressing. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. We got 4,000 American citizens dying every day still. And
people dealing with the threat of homelessness because they can't pay their rent. Right. And that's a problem that goes across a lot of different communities.
Yeah, that's
and
not
so
a black
instead of
problem.
those people, no, it's not just a black thing. So instead of those people coming together and forming that fist against capitalism and forming that fist against the oligarchy, we're looking at this. We're distracted by this.
People versus people. And I like how you put it earlier that the United States Capitol, that's the house of the people. Like you said, they were attacking the CAPITOL. They were not attacking the CAPITAL. And if you attack,
and they don't have to take us seriously until we do the latter.
Absolutely.
And they will not. They will not take us seriously until we do the latter.
Absolutely.
However you manifest that, I'm just saying, like I said, I'm not here advocating for violence. I'm just saying until you try to change that system, they will keep letting us shoot ourselves.
Yep. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that sentiment more from both of you here. And that leads me to believe, of course, I got some thoughts on this, but what do you guys think should happen to the individuals involved, from leadership all the way down to the lowly rioter?
So I think that every single person that was there and participated should be held accountable, whether it is a ticket. You can get tickets for protesting, but that's just, pay to play. But, all the way up to murder, treason, our elected officials need to be held accountable. We need to allow the government that we do have handle this through the ways that, the Constitution. I think that's some very serious charges, and I hope that we make an example.
Expulsion. And if we don't have the political will to expel these politicians that stoke the fires and the flames of this riot, then we need to remove them from political leadership. They don't need the priority placements on these committees or subcommittees. They need to be punished however they can within the body that they serve, to let people know that follow that this is not behavior becoming of a representative of the American government, whether that's senator or congressperson or state legislature. So if we can't expel them, they need to lose all their placements on those committees and be treated as a freshman senator or freshman congressperson in there, and just sort of have to work their way back into the good graces of their colleagues who they endangered. They endangered their lives.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you guys here. My first one might be a little bit controversial. This is what I'm going to say. what I think should happen is I agree with all of those things, but I think there's levels to this. You got normal citizens involved, you got military people involved, you got police officers involved, you got elected officials involved. I think as far as the citizens go, at the citizen level, save for the murderers, I think that President Joe Biden should pardon every citizen that was involved in that uprising, save for anyone that's involved in the murdering of any other individual. Now, I know that's a little bit controversial, but that's because I believe that the citizens were hyped up. These citizens were fed that fire by people who have a lot more authority. Again, where I feel is that the citizens, if you're a normal citizen, I believe that you got hyped up, you got radicalized by a president through Twitter, through his media, through other elected officials, through other leadership. I think that the citizens got hyped up. And if you weren't involved in the murder, I think to begin to kind of heal this nation, I think Joe Biden should go in and pardon the everyday citizens that were a part of this uprising. Now, with that being said, the military service members, I think that the UCMJ should deal with the military. We have policies and laws on the books for military service members that participate in treason and sedition. And I think that those individuals should be charged with that because they are held to a standard to protect this nation, not attack this nation. They took an oath and they disavowed that oath once they stormed the Capitol. And that goes the same for police officers as well. If you're a police officer and you were involved in this uprising, you should be punished to the highest extent of the law and tried for sedition and treason. And that is the same thing for elected officials. If you're an elected official and you participated in this, you should be removed from office, expelled from office, barred from holding any public office for the rest of your life. This includes President Donald Trump and everyone below him that supported the claims of voter fraud, everyone that supported the claims and to push to overturn the election of the American people. Those people cannot be trusted.
I need to learn how to be as compassionate as Kekey is, because apparently I don't have enough Christ in me, because we at different points have not been able to look at white people in the eye and live through the day. So to tell me that you can, as a grown adult, because these were adults, and I don't care how persuasive a politician thinks they are, but you cannot say anything that's going to make me commit a crime unless I want to commit that crime. So these grown adults decided they wanted to participate in sedition, trespassing, or whatever you want to call it. There has to be some kind of punishment for that. Otherwise, you could always explain it away as, well, Trump said this and it got me, got my ire up and whatever. Like they have to have some kind of consequence for their actions as adults in a quote unquote civilized society. So while I applaud your compassion and your willingness to try to move on to the next step, the first step is acknowledging that something that you did was wrong, and then moving on from there. But as you talk about sweeping and getting all those bugs out, that costs money. So perhaps the punishment needs to be financial, so that they're having to bankroll all of that work that it's going to take in order to make sure that these locations are secure. Because that was one of the things that I was incredulous about. I was like, I'm surprised they're back in that building so fast doing this vote. I was like, how do they know that there's not some other secondary device that they put in there to get them once they got back into session? Because that was the point. They wanted to kill these politicians, allegedly, for stealing their America. And so to let that go that lightly, nah. I mean, loose cigarettes, jaywalking. I mean, we get killed for all kinds of stuff. And I'm not saying that we need to act like they act, but they need to have some kind of punishment for what they've done.
So Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us today. Now What is dedicated to topics and issues impacting the brown and black community, to elevate and empower our people, our voices, and our cultures. We hope today's episode inspired you to have a Now What moment. You can hear music inspiration for today's episode on the Now What Radio Spotify playlist. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and listen to us at nowwhatradio.com.